Xi Jinping and the Politburo and the CCB, they've said they want to be able to achieve an amphibious and aerial invasion and landing by 2030. They've come out and they've said that.
While the US is bullying everyone and taking like 5%, 10% from that, Putin is just giving free oil and Russia is just giving free AI tools to people. Yeah, I get it. I see what's happening in the world now.
I think they supported them hugely, and they've done the calculus that only a 5,000 year old civilization can possibly do to actually get what they want to get in the long term. They're politically adroit.
Look at my eyes rolling when you say 5,000 civilizations. Oh, the wise Eastern Chinese Orientals. They take the time.
The Confucius age.
They take the time.
Let's talk about Trump's tariffs. What do you think about Trump's tariffs, Ashkan? Because I've got some interesting things to say.
Well, I think you're more qualified to talk about it than me. I don't actually know what tariffs supposed to do, but it's like,
you sound
firstly,
like Trump,
like
you sound like Trump. You don't know what they do.
Yeah, I saw like you guys having conversation. And it was interesting that you and one of our dear friends, he knows who he is if he ever watches this. He does represent. He does represent exactly what I would say, like how the left act in front of like Trump and what Trump does. Trump is the president. He's just making moves daily, and the left still sneering. Oh, he doesn't know what tariffs means. Who gives a he's stupid. He doesn't. He has all the power in the world now.
He doesn't know what a tariff is. I'm like, whatever, bro. He knows precise. Anyone who says Trump doesn't know what a tariff is knows precisely what a tariff is. What they don't recognize, or what they fail to appreciate, is that Trump's use of tariffs isn't explicitly to try and bring like a pain against a foreign adversary or even to balance the books. It's to do something else. If you're looking at Trump's tariffs just in isolation, like he's putting 25% on Canada, he's putting 10% on China, you're going to think like, what is this guy doing? He's prevaricating, he's going up and down, he's whipsawing. They're obviously going to give reciprocal tariffs. They're obviously going to apply reciprocal 25% tariffs. So it's a zero-sum game. No one's coming out on top. But that's the mistake to make. Trump is the man of the deal, Ashkan, and he's using those tariffs, in my opinion, as a bargaining chip. That's why you see him constantly giving reprieves, delaying, renegotiating, because the tariffs are not in isolation. And that's the mistake, to view them in isolation. You should be viewing them in concert with the other intended policy decisions from the Treasury Department and from his economic bureaus and his fleet of advisors, which are to reshore, bring manufacturing back, which to rebase the dollar as global hegemonic reserve currency, and to ensure that there's no competitive advantage through the main adversary, who's not Russia, but actually China. And once you view it in that concert, in that triangulation, the tariffs make much more sense. But if you just view it, that's why people say, he doesn't know what he's doing. The tariffs make no sense. He doesn't know what a tariff is. No, it's part of a larger agenda.
Yeah, the thing is, well, tell me more. Like, how is he act? Like, I've heard this as well when I talk to my colleagues. Like, he's just trying to, even what he's doing with Russia, he's just trying to put all his focus on China and even bring Russia back to his fold. So sort of try to isolate China from like any allies that they might have. That's why he's even putting an overture to Iran, saying like, come have a deal with us. And
look, one of the biggest nightmares of America is the same nightmare they had at the height of the Soviet Union and they had at the height of like proper communist China. Not what we see now, like communism with Chinese characteristics, but it was the combination and the unification of Russia and China which really shook America to its core. And now the move towards Russia is not because this amateur-esque interpretation of Trump liking strongmen, when you just have to look at how he talks about Xi Jinping on one day compared to the other to realize that it's not an affinity with strongmen. It's to try and prevent the combination, the strategic alliance, the economic union, and the geospatial union of Russia and China has always been the biggest worry and concern of many American administrations. So pulling closer to Russia, he's hoping somehow to stop them from coming really closer to China. But if you have forgotten, China and Russia signed a treaty to say that they are going to be cooperating economically, militarily, strategically, no matter what. They literally were saying we're best friends and nothing's ever going to come between us. So Trump trying to do that might be a bit naive. We have to look at Trump as like an amateur politician compared to people who are like career politicians, people who come from the state apparatus of like intelligence services and politburos. Xi Jinping is a trained dynastic politician. Putin is a trained agent who's worked his way through the ranks into the height of politics and probably is quite possibly the richest man in the world, like on paper, even though it's undisclosed. But those two guys are completely adroit political actors. When it comes to Trump, Trump's a baby. So Russia is rubbing its hands together. They've got everything they ever wanted without having to negotiate on a single thing. And that really shows you the amateurish political maneuverings of someone like Trump versus someone like Putin and someone like Xi Jinping. That hope that by dealing with Russia, bringing them back into the economic sphere, bringing them out of the cold, taking away the sanctions, giving them all of the land they want, creating to every single one of their demands is going to somehow curry favor and ingratiate Russia with America. It's complete folly. It's completely silly. It's misguided. It's short term. And if you want to look at it at its worst, it's venal and corrupt because Trump's trying to enrich and ingratiate and enrich his own cadre of people. And at worst, it's completely ignorant and naive because it's never going to work. It's just going to push those two spheres of influence even closer and at the same time sapping any kind of influence America actually has or wants to procure or wants to sustain. So it's very misguided.
Yeah, well, in terms of Russia, do you think they are actually happy with how China is acting? Like, has China actually been that supportive of Russia throughout the war, or have they just got cheaper oil and were content with it, and they really stayed out of anything else? And that's been their policy anyway. Like, they've been looking at everything very long term, just like inch by inch, just get more and get more. And in regards to Trump as well, let me just tell you that, like, what he's doing with U.S. allies can't be good either, because like even though he's using it as a negotiation tactic and say like come back to the table, we need to renegotiate everything. He might even get a better deal, but this will be remembered, and the U.S. reputation for reneging and going back from a deal will be remembered in Europe, will be remembered in Canada. So there will be like there hasn't been a mistrust between Europe and US, but now it's really growing that we might be on our own in Europe, and you can't really trust US anymore. And that means you actually might be pushing even Europe towards China more. Like I think I had because few weeks ago, who was talking in Brussels, but basically someone who was, I think it was the Munich conference, and they pretty much changed his speech from just being very tough on China to sort of just ease up on China. So it's having sort of the different, the opposite effect, because like, okay, you can't really trust US. US might just pull their troops. US might just pull their funding. So you don't want to like make a big enemy out of China. China that seems to be more organized now, more sensible, more grown up. And I am someone who always been sort of against China, but you call it spade to spade. US seem like all disorganized, not making any sense, and not even their allies can't trust them anymore. But whereas China, they're like, okay, we'll just make a deal, and we're just looking at everything long term. We don't want to even get that much involved. Like even what they're doing in Africa, it's like they're buying influence, but they're not doing it in a very crude way. They're not doing it in a way that it's not even being reported in Europe, because if they did anything like close to what the Europeans actually did in Africa, it would have been all over the news. Um, and I think so. In long term, China is doing a much better, does have a much better strategy, and the whole boogeyman thing of China is sort of dying down. I don't know if it's actually there's any changes in China. If it's just because US is turning into sort of authoritarian government itself, so you're just like, do
That
you want to go with the sensible one or do you want to go with the crazy one?
right, right. Um, the thing is, the political cycle in these nations is what you have to assess in order to understand their modus operandi and their motivations. The political cycle in the West is 4 to 5 years. Short-termism, enriching yourself, trying to go at everything with a sledgehammer rather than a surgical scalpel. Compared to China, who think in centuries. They think in decades. They think in half centuries. That's how long term their strategy
They're
is. So
thinking Mandarin
yeah,
or
I,
Cantonese.
they speak, they think in long-term cycles. Okay, now the issue with Western politics, well, some people may say, and before you paint me as a like Chinese enthusiast, the issue with Western politics is that it's such a short political cycle. People come in there and they often try to enrich themselves in office. They often try to apply a sledgehammer to a problem that really needs the surgicality of a scalpel. That's Trump's main problem. Trump's one tool is a sledgehammer, a bulldozer. And that makes sense. I mean, it comes from the world of construction. But when it comes to the surgical, refined needs of like political statecraft, he can't do it because he hasn't got that wide runway in terms of like how long Putin has in power or someone like Xi Jinping has in power. Now, you've raised an interesting question before about what do I think what China has done or should they have done more in Russia? I think China have done what China can do without being a global pariah. I think China have supported Russia in the way they can, buying oil at a market rate rather than a lower rate. I think they've done what they can do in terms of facilitating payments and allowing the renminbi and the yuan banking system to be able to facilitate global trade for Russia where it hasn't been able to do it before. I think they've been able to use Hong Kong and other proxies as a conduit to allow Russia to procure high chips, like really sophisticated semiconductors and chips. They supported them in the ways they can. It would be an absolute red line, an anathema, an antithetical idea for China to provide military support. But what they can do, they can talk to North Korea, who's basically a vassal state,
Hmm.
and say, hey, send some troops. We've been propping up your state for the last 100, well, the last 50 years through successive dynasties of your father, your father, your father. Send some troops there. China are doing what China can do in the only way that China can do it. Now,
Hmm.
the real outcome here, the real good coup d'etat for China is to see what Russia were able to achieve in Ukraine, the annexation of Crimea, the taking of land, and the repercussions or lack thereof of ramifications to Russia. What they have been doing is they've been saying, "Hey, look what happened there. What is the game plan? What's the mechanisms of response, and how do we superimpose that and juxtapose that against what we're going to do in Taiwan?" Because believe it or not, Taiwan reunification with the mainland is not just a pipe dream. It's going to be happening. I mean, Xi Jinping and the Politburo and the CCB, they've said they want to be able to achieve an amphibious and aerial invasion and landing by 2030. They've come out and they've said that. And all of the attention since Trump has come into office has completely gone away from Taiwan. Now, why is that? Well, it's because Trump is not providing overt support for Ukraine. So it seemed like they're less of like a territorial foreign adventure, imperialistic, militaristic thing that America had been under the Biden administration. But more crucially, what people haven't really realized, the rhetoric about we'll defend Taiwan until the last man, even if every Taiwanese person dies, we'll defend them, which was what was coming from America before. Not in those like strict terms. I mean, Nancy Pelosi flying over there was pretty like bellicose. But what has gone under the radar is that the main reason why the world is concerned about Taiwan isn't the fact that Taiwan is a free democratic nation. It's because they have TSMC, the largest semiconductor and chip manufacturer in the world, which everything is reliant on, from refrigerators to F-35 jets. Now, slowly but surely, if you've been keeping up with the news, last week the TSMC CEO went to the White House Oval Office and said we're going to invest a further $100 billion in chip fabrication plants in America. That makes Taiwan less relevant. They don't need to protect Taiwan. Long story short, China have supported Russia the way they only support them, with the long view, which is in line with their political cycle being much more elongated, the long view of further reunifying with Taiwan. They've used Ukraine as a petri dish experiment. So when you say, when you ask, have they supported them enough? I think they supported them hugely, and they've done the calculus that only a 5,000-year civilization can possibly do to actually get what they want to get in the long term. They're politically adroit. They're expert players.
Look at my eyes rolling when you said 5,000 civilization. Oh, the wise Eastern Chinese Orientals. They take their time.
The Confucius age.
They take the time and they just say wise things.
Do you see?
I don't think there are
I'm wearing red.
What I would say, like my criticism. I don't think I might be actually no, actually you might be right, but I don't think a Chinese person is constantly aware of their 5,000 years. Like they don't look at things like that. But then I think of Iranians and the way we look at things. It is actually like like ours isn't like 5,000, but it's 2,500, and we do talk about like 2,500 years ago as if it was yesterday.
So I mean, you do.
Yeah.
Chinese do as well.
Yeah, so.
I've dated Chinese girls who literally talk to me about the Ming Dynasty. Like I've spoken to Chinese. I've dated them who talk about it like it was yesterday.
Yeah, well, like even like still, if you say Alexander the Great in Iran, like who? Him, that bastard, the one who banned Persepolis. That. Yeah. So yeah, but even worse with the Arab invasion, that's still Iranians are still very sore about it. That was 1,400 years ago.
I mean, these are ancient civilizations.
Yeah. So like it feels weird that they're. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I jumped in the middle of when you said 5,000. I shouldn't have. You were saying, you stopped.
It's fine. Look, they are politically adroit. They know what they need.
Sorry, I jump in again. Sorry.
Story short,
I had a question for you. You said
yes.
China bought oil from Russia, not cheaper, and it was the market prices. Is that right? Are you just is that part of your propaganda, Chinese propaganda? That is that like? Have you read it in the news, or is it like one of your papers from Beijing to you?
Look. You might not realize this, but Russia uses oil as a political tool for the expediting of certain foreign policies. For example, did you know that Russia has basically been sending Turkey oil for free for the last 4 years to suppress inflation in Turkey? What do you think they've been doing that for? It's not because they like Turkey. It's because they can ingratiate themselves with Erdogan and they can help their buddy in Turkey in order to achieve policy goals later down the line when they say, hey, you owe us a favor. It's the same thing that China have been doing with Russia. Now, the way they've structured the deals is more complex. When you ask about is it fair market rates, you have to talk about how they exchange money for oil. It's not always simply like a one-for-one transaction between oil and cash. Sometimes they use derivative contracts. Sometimes they layer it in certain tranches so that the money will be received later on rather than right up front. Sometimes they layer it on an average median basis so that the price of oil is averaged over a long period of time. When it comes to have they paid the actual market rate, the whole calculus comes a lot more complex because it's staggered. It's not just priced at a fixed rate. It's priced into the future and it's priced along option curves and derivatives. But I can say that they have paid closer to a market rate for Russian oil, not on paper, because they did want to evade sanctions. They don't want their fleets to be sanctioned. But on paper, They paid a higher market rate. Final settlement.
Okay, yeah. So, first I gotta say it's amazing how you can switch between English, Russian, and Mandarin like so smoothly, and this.
Let me go to American then. Let me switch that to
Secondly,
American. Yeah.
I can't find anything about Russia selling giving oil for free to Turkey. That sounds very stupid, and I can't find it anywhere. Where'd you get your news?
Do you know what? You can't find it because you're not looking hard enough. Do you know why? Because you've got the blinkers of the West on your eyes. That's the problem, Ashkan. Your fingers are like this. Oh, West cannot type. Think Westernly. Think of the Western sphere of influence. Your computer is literally blocking your ability to see impartial news, or you lack the ability to search in a refined manner. Now, I'm not blaming you for that. I'm blaming the fact that you've been bludgeoned by Western propaganda for far too long, Ashkan. But that's okay. We move on. Now, because you've accused me of
but
talking...
why are we moving on? No. First, we have to find where you got this news. Uncle Putin giving free oil to other countries to stop inflation. Didn't you know?
Putin, Father Stalin of the fatherland. No, this is what I want you to do. Search Russian subsidized oil to Turkey. And then you'll find it. But in the meantime, let me talk. Because I've been accused of being a Chinese agent, a Russian agent.
Can you hear the song as well?
People.
Can you hear?
But let me talk about American. Now, look, someone holds up America as the bastion of mercantilism, of free trade, of like free speech. Let's be honest, the most recent executive orders out of the Trump White House and the administration are completely anathema to that. Let me draw your attention to one of the executive orders. Now, before you ask me, I don't know the exact executive order number, and nor do you, but I'm still going to talk about it. It's about maritime trade. Now, do you know that the bastions, the monoliths of free trade, are trying to say to every cargo ship coming into America that you now have to pay $1 million for every 5,000 tonnage you bring to our port. Furthermore, if you come from a Chinese port, you have to pay 5% of the value of the goods on your ship for every port you dock at in the United States. That adds up, because some ships, they port at multiple different ports in the United States at once. Furthermore, it's going to be a tiered system where it starts off as 5%, it starts off as 15%, then it goes to 20%. But the most egregious thing is that they have said, going forward, we want 5% of your international maritime fleet to be ships that have been built in the United States. Now, why have the United States done that? Well, because China has about 1,000 times maritime vessels than America does, which makes sense because China's whole economic model is on export internationally across the seas. But what I'm trying to say to you is that it's just not one direction of subsidization. It's not just one direction of the socialization of risk. It goes in all ways. These competitive agreements are international. And if you actually look at some of the executive orders, America are acting far more authoritarian and totalitarian than China or Russia actually are in terms of the limiting of free trade, using their power as the global reserve to sanction people, stealing people's sovereign assets, and the list goes on. So if we're going to talk about someone being a Mandarin or a Chinese sympathizer, we have to also talk about the fact that the things going on in America and some of these Western nations where, quote unquote, democracy is the rule of the land, some of these things are egregious and they fly in the face of the democratic process. See, nothing to say. He has nothing to say. He has nothing to say on that issue. Nothing to say on that issue. Do you know why?
I'm just listening to this beautiful song called Katyusha. You definitely knows it. It's sang by the Red Army Orchestra. Can you hear it? Can you hear it?
I can't hear it because my Chinese overlords have obviously filtered that rubbish out, right? But what I'm
Well,
trying to
that's Russian. You should. This should be.
what?
So
But this
basically,
is look.
no, I understand, but basically, while US is bullying everyone and taking like 5%, 10% from there, Putin is just giving free oil, and Russia is just giving free AI tools to people. Yeah, I get it. Yeah, no,
It's
yeah,
not.
I
It's
see
not
what's
that.
happening in the world now.
It's not that simple. You're right. Look, Russia was an aggressor, but for legitimate reasons, in my opinion. You might disagree with me for that, but just as simply as you have explained that,
Because what
um,
Ukraine said, he made Russia mad. So it's Ukraine. Look what you made me do.
you make me hit you. You make me hit you. I love you.
I don't want to do this.
You're making me. But no, the way you simply rebuff things without any kind of critical investigation is part of the problem. Now, I'm not trying to say you're a problem. I know you're a very intelligent person. But most other individuals, you cannot have a critical conversation about the realities on the ground without them writing you off as a Putin apologist or a Chinese sympathizer, which is why there is no constructive debate, which is why there's such a
Hmm.
bifurcation, a delineation between the left and the right, and why everyone is now pushing their polarized opinion one way or the other without anyone in the middle being able to have an actual adult conversation. I like to use the
Hmm.
statistics and the as I have them to have a seasoned and a reasoned debate, not just throw out,
Yeah.
oh, you're a Putin sympathizer, you're a Russian sympathizer. Where's the nuance? What is it? And what's my paycheck, Putin?
Yeah, but the thing is, I need to see the information you just said, the new information provided, but I can't really find it anywhere. Apparently, it's only on files in, um, I
Not
don't
a
know, maybe
problem.
a Russian. It's Kremlin on files in Kremlin, and I don't know what's the Chinese intelligence service called, but so I haven't got
Yeah,
access
but
to
I'm
those. Free oil being sent to Turkey. That's the first time I've ever heard of that. Russia
do you
sending.
know what? Do you know what?
Yeah.
Do you know what? I'm
You
gonna
know,
search this
they
right
can
now.
just give it half price, and Erdogan still would take it, right? Like they don't need to give it for free. Oh, he's searching. He's now doing his research.
No, I'm not. I'm not doing no research. I'm trying to
Mm.
find you.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right. Turkey doubles
Don't tell
Russian
Chat
oil
GPT. Please
imports.
repeat.
No, no, no,
Could
no,
you
no, no,
please
no.
repeat this and put a fake source on it?
No, no. Turkey doubles Russia. This is by Reuters, by the way. Do you have anything against Reuters?
I have some things like against Reuters, but I accept them if they report
you have
something.
you have something against everyone. Yes, they
Yeah,
doubled
yeah.
their oil
Everyone can
imports from Russia.
get it. Could you send me the link? Oh, tiny little chat here.
I'll send it to you after we finish this
Yeah,
debate.
because then because you don't want me
No,
to
no,
go through it
no,
live.
because no, because I need to find the
Just
actual sources for this, even though I know it to be true. By the way, I need
yeah.
to find the
Well, I mean, as long as you feel like it's true, it's true. Like it's all about your feelings. Like if you feel like it's true, it's your truth and your worldview. I completely respect that. It doesn't have to be based on reality. As long as you're happy with it. If Justine
well.
happy with it, happy.
Yes,
God.
Turkey saves billions on Russian oil as imports soar from subsidization. Okay, it's not free, but it's heavily subsidized. I stand corrected. I stand corrected. They
Well, at
saved
least
20 billion. 20 billion they saved. But the question is, where's that
mm,
money going? Because it's not all largesse, you know what I mean? If I were in the middle, I'd like to think I would be a good actor and not be unscrupulous. But if I was getting cheap oil from
mm,
somewhere and the market rate was still the market rate in my country, you better
mm,
damn believe that I'm adding my premium on top of it as well to make my little cut.
mm,
I'm sure they have done that.
So it's discounted Russian oil. So that was
Heavily,
my whole
heavily.
point. Russia is giving discounted oil to Turkey. They're giving it to China, and I don't think China is doing that much to do anything for Russia. At least not to my knowledge.
Um, what China's doing things. What is China doing for Russia?
Yeah, just like voting, maybe, and doing some. Hmm.
We are paying $3.50 per barrel to Russia. This is per Reuters, by the way. I'll happily send you this link.
No, for crude, it has discount of between $5 to $20 per barrel. Yeah, so it's like around anything between 10 to
30%.
30%, I guess.
30%.
Yeah, well, that's what Iran's doing as well. That's why it's just messing up everyone. Iran's just giving it even not for free. They're not even paying back Iran. They're just paying back Iran in goods. Or sometimes they're not even paying Iran back. Like there was Iran's I think finance minister just got, yeah, he pretty much got impeached because of the situation in Iran. And the president of Iran, Pezeshkian, was talking uh, like the issues Iran faces in parliament. And it was saying like Qatar owes us 5 billion, Turkey owes us this much. None of them are paying up because
Wow.
the Iran situation, and they're not even paying back in goods because they're
So
really
why do they
like
keep
Iran
sending
can't
the
do
oil?
anything.
Why do they keep sending the
Uh,
oil?
well, they probably getting some money back, but there's some money that they're not getting back. I suppose I don't know why they still keep sending them away. Um, because that's their only option, I guess. They send their oil to China. To be honest, it's not just oil. I think it's just other things as well.
Right.
Because they're sanctioned, they can't really do anything.
Without sounding rude, but what else does Iran export?
Um, well, it's funny that you say that. Without sounding rude, why would you sound rude? Well, gas.
No, because I don't want to be like, oh, you know how they
Iran has
characterize
more.
Russia?
Well, yeah, but Iran has more
They say to
gas.
Russia, Russia's just the petrol station of the world. That's what all they say about
Yeah,
Russia. When in
but
fact they have
Iran
a
is
diversified
as
economy.
well. I like really, it's very regretful that Iran is in such a dire situation that they couldn't really use Russia's situation to their advantage at all, because Russia has the most gas reserve in the world. Iran is the second.
Right.
Iran also has the fourth oil reserve in the world, and they're not really
Hmm.
using it for the people anyway. But and they couldn't use this situation to start pumping gas to Europe and be a second source. But they haven't been able to do that like in the last 40 years. They could have really, like when things went sour with Russia, they could have used that opportunity to become the main source of gas to Europe. But obviously, it can't happen in a year or two. But there were no steps taken to actually, be an option because they're a prior state. But other than that, to answer your question, what else Iran? Well, I know saffron, like Iran is like the top exporter. But if you type, you can't even get Iran as the exporter of saffron. Don't type, just do top exporters of saffron. Don't type Iran.
They didn't even come up. They didn't come up
Well,
at
it
all.
has. No, is it not coming up? Sometimes they don't, because what they do is they wholesale to Spain and China, and like literally like 80-90% of the saffron is from Iran, but they're repackaged and sold as the product of other countries.
Right. Is that to avoid
Mm.
sanctions or?
It is, and also it was always like that. I think because Iran didn't have the facilities to, the proper branding to, sell the saffrons themselves, so they sold it much cheaper to other countries, and they sold it to consumers.
So the main exports of Iran: ethylene polymers, iron ore, acrylic alcohol derivatives, petroleum gas, and refined copper. I had no idea they refined copper. They export
Apparently, I
mostly to
didn't either.
China.
I didn't know about the copper. The rest are from obviously uh, oil
Oil,
anyway.
obviously,
Like
but
yeah, oil
I'm
derivatives.
it's interesting that they don't export crude. They remake products downstream from oil, but they're not
They
exporting
do
actual
export
like
crude.
crude oil.
No,
It
they
doesn't even
no,
say
they
it here.
do, but no, because it's sanctioned. But they do. They send it all
That's
to
right.
China.
That's right.
They
That's
send
right.
like 2 million barrels a day, 1 million barrels a day to China mostly,
And
and
what's the
India.
capacity?
Mm.
At their peak. What is their
They I
peak?
think 5 or 6 millions
Yeah.
a day. I think in 2017, 16, I think they were doing something like that, or
Oh
maybe
yeah,
2019. I don't know.
6 million barrels per day in 1974. 10% of the world's oil output in the 1970s. 6 million,
Oh,
and
you
then
should
now
read about
only
Iran from Yeah, you should read about Iran in 1974 till before the revolution. How much how much money they had, and what it did to inflation as well. I mean, I actually
yeah,
really know. Like in the last year, it didn't really work. Um, for Iranian government back in the day because